This morning is the installment of Parsha in our regular Pirkei Avos class, and we are a project of Intentional Jew Podcast Network. Go and check out our content and our website, subscribe to our newsletter. There's a lot of amazing content up there, both from this class and from other speakers and other teachers, really some great stuff. Okay, this week's Parshas Vayeitzei. And I'll come back to, well, we'll see if we have enough time to deal with a few different ideas. But there's one idea that is central to me in this parsha. We know that Yakov Avinu has to run away because of what happened with the Bechorah, with the firstbornship. I know that people have asked me about how we understand that concept of the fact that Yakov stole the Bechorah from Esav. And I think that we use those words, and those are the wrong words. He didn't steal anything. He bought it, and whether it seems like he manipulated him a little bit or not really is immaterial. At the end of the day, this was a much bigger thing than just the fact that Yaakov coveted being the firstborn, and therefore when Esav was willing to sell it, Yaakov jumped on it. And Esav was in a bit of a vulnerable position because he was hungry. So Yaakov said, "Perfect opportunity for me to grab the thing that I always wanted." It had nothing to do with that. Yaakov Avinu recognized that the Bechorah was really the spiritual leadership of the Jewish people. And he also understood very clearly that Esav, who was supposed to be on some level the Bechor, and he was supposed to have a chelik, he was supposed to have a portion in the Torah, Esav was in fact supposed to stand at the foot of Mount Sinai. It's not a medrash that everybody knows, but Esav was supposed to be standing at the foot of Mount Sinai along with the Jewish people, and Esav was supposed to receive a portion of the Torah. He was going to receive what we call the Olam Hazeh, the physical part of the Torah. Yaakov was meant to take that and to be able to add the spiritual component to it, and we were meant to be partners. The 70 nations of the world were meant to be our backups. They also had a chelik in the Torah, and all of us were meant to stand there. God went around to the nations of the world and asked them if they wanted the Torah, and everybody denied it. Everybody said no, they didn't want. They abdicated their responsibility and their rights to be able to have a part of the Torah. So did Esav. And that's the reason why it says that Leah's eyes were red from crying. What was Leah crying about? She was crying, says the medrash, because she knew she was going to have to marry Esav. Okay, Esav was not the best guy, but why was she crying because of that? She was crying because she knew that Esav, she really was worried because Esav had given up his rights to the Bechorah, which meant that Esav was no longer going to be taking up his position in the Jewish people. And where was that going to leave her? And that's why Yaakov Avinu needed to marry her, because she was the proper mate to Esav in his role as the companion to the Torah with Yaakov. But now that he'd given up his position, so now that transferred over to Yaakov, and therefore Yaakov had to marry two wives. He had to marry both of them because the kochos of Rachel and the kochos of Leah were both necessary in Klal Yisrael. Yaakov Avinu understood that Esav was not fitting to be the Bechor, and therefore he had to do everything he could to make sure that he was able to get that away from him. He waited for the moment that Esav showed himself to be unfit for taking that position, and it was at that moment that he pounced. And he showed himself to be unfit because he came in on the day of the burial of his father, of his grandfather, and all he could see was red soup. He didn't see a Sudas Avrah, he didn't see anything greater than that. All he saw was red soup. And therefore Yaakov Avinu understood that this was the exact moment to take it from him. The bracha that was given later only solidified that which had already taken place in the time of the Bechorah of the red soup incident. Because of that incident, because of the way Esav reacted to that incident, Yaakov Avinu needed to run away. Yaakov Avinu runs. He goes to the mishpacha. He goes to his mother's family. And the Torah tells us in a very dramatic way that he gets there. There's an incredible lesson that, first of all, there's a makor for Jewish geography. When Jews get together, they love to play Jewish geography. Oh, you're from there. Do you know so-and-so? And it's like a favorite pastime of ours. It's not a favorite pastime. It is woven into our DNA. Yaakov Avinu comes to town, and what's the first thing he says? He says, "Anybody know my relatives?" "Oh, your Uncle Lavan? He's not here. But there are your two cousins." And from there began the Jewish pastime of playing Jewish geography. Now, the game of Jewish geography, by the way, I have a lot to say about. I'm not going to talk about it now, but it always gets annoying when you play that game with somebody who there's no way you know anybody from where they're from. My wife is from Burlington, Vermont. So whenever we play that game, they say, "Oh, where are you from?" I say, "New York." "Oh, New York." Their eyes light up. People love that. "Okay, and where are you from?" "Burlington, Vermont." Oh, okay. There's not much to say after that. Sometimes they'll say, "Oh, do you know so and so?" "Yes, that's my sister." But short of that, it doesn't really get you anywhere. So Yaakov Avinu comes in. He finds out that he's got two cousins there. He looks at his cousins, and he sees that he knows exactly who he's going to marry. Vayishak Yaakov leRachel, he kisses Rachel. Vayisa eskolo, and he lifts his voice. Vayevk, and he cries. And our commentaries say that why was he crying? Because he came empty-handed. He came with nothing, and he was so disturbed that he had nothing to give what was going to be his new bride. That Vayevk, he cried. Now, the truth is, we're talking about Yaakov Avinu. Why is he crying? Because you can't bring a gift? Gifts are nothing. You don't value them. Why would anybody else value them? You know what they're worth. You know they're nothing. So what were you worried about? And you have to ask Rachel. If Rachel would have asked him, "Why are you crying?" He says, "Because I can't buy you a present." It's like, whoa, do I want to marry somebody so needy? Like what's with that? Why is that considered like an incredible thing, Vayevk, that Yaakov Avinu cried when he realized that he couldn't give anything to her? That's problem number one. Problem number two, how long did Yaakov Avinu work for Rachel? So we know that Yaakov Avinu worked 7 years for Rachel. And we always see it as some kind of manipulation that Lavan did because he worked for 7 years. He ended up, he promised him 7 years, and then he ended up marrying the wrong girl, and then he had to work more years. But the truth is, if you look at it very carefully, it was Yaakov Avinu that made the offer. Yaakov Avinu said, "I'll work for her for 7 years." It came from him. Rashi says later that the minhag in that town was that the bride's family would give money, not take money. So what was going on here? Why was Yaakov Avinu paying for this woman with 7 years of work when really the family should have been paying Yaakov Avinu for this? What was going on here that Yaakov offered? And when you offer, why are you offering top dollar? Negotiate. Offer a year. I'll give you 15 minutes of work. Start off slow. And then when you get pushed up, so then fine, you're going to make a big offer. Okay, fine, I'll take that. But Yaakov Avinu walks in and he says, "I'll give you $1 billion. I'll work 7 years for you." What was going on here? And the Torah tells us that he worked for her for 7 years, and it was kiyomim achadim. It was like one day. Really? Like one day? And it could very well be that I've mentioned this before, but when you have to do something far off in the future, something exciting, you're going somewhere, you're taking a big vacation, something incredible is going to happen in your life, a child, a grandchild is going to get married, though the days until that event takes place, those are like years. They just stretch and schlep. They don't happen like that. And yet it says by Yaakov that he was working 7 years for her, and it was like one day, kiyomim achodim, like yom echad, like one day. How did that happen? That it just came in, it was so fast and so quick, like one day. Such an amazing thing. That we know by the mitzvah of kibud av v'em. The mitzvah of kavod, of honor, is that a child has to feed their parent, the child has to take care of their parent, the child has to take their parent out for walks, has to do whatever they can for their parent. Feeding, dressing, driving them, doing all of that, clothing them. So one would think that this would be an expensive mitzvah. And the rabbis tell us that the money comes from Mishel Ha'av. The money comes from the parent. You don't have to spend your money on taking care of your parent. You can spend their money on taking care of them. So then what's the mitzvah? What's the kunz? Okay, I'll get them a new house for their money. I'll take care of them from their money. I'll buy filet mignon from their money. So where is the mitzvah of kibbud avim? Because the mitzvah is not in what you spend. The mitzvah is in how you spend it and how you prepare it. The mitzvah is in the time that you spend with them, the attention that you give to them, the feeling that you leave them with by doting over them and by taking care of them. That is the mitzvah of kibbud avim. It doesn't need to cost you. Even though other mitzvahs that we do, they have to cost us, we have to spend up to 1/5 of our wealth, not in the mitzvah of kibbud avim, because the actual mitzvah is not giving them anything. The actual mitzvah is how they feel. We know that when you give money to a person, usually you make them feel uncomfortable. Nobody really likes to receive, or often don't like to receive. And when we receive things, we don't know exactly where to put ourselves, how to comport ourselves. Because a person who you give him something, the bigger that thing is, the more he realizes that he can't take care of himself without you, the more difficult that is. That's why the mitzvah of hakaras hatov, of gratitude, is such a complicated thing, because it's very difficult for us to admit that we couldn't do this alone. And that if without you, I never would have been able to do this. That's why our rabbis tell us, Sone matanos yichya. Somebody who hates presents will live. Not just because you don't want to come on to other people, but you don't want to feel like you're not self-sufficient. So a Soni matanos, a person who hates receiving things because he wants to be self-sufficient, yichya, he's going to live a much better life. That's why what kibbud avim is, it's not trying to take away their dignity. The more you give them, the more dignity you're going to destroy of theirs. But rather, it's to preserve their dignity. It's not about the money. It's about the honor and the dignity that you give them. The personal service, that's the honor. And the more that you do it in an honorable way, so then the greater message that it sends to them that, yes, you could do this on your own. Yes, you're proficient. You're self-sufficient. I'm not taking that away from you. But I just want to help because you're my parent, because I respect you, I honor you, I love you. That was the difference between Yaakov's kibbud avim and Esav's kibbud avim. Esav's kibbud avim was payback. His dad was nice to him, he took care of him. By Yakov, his kibbud avim was to elevate his father. It was because he recognized the godless of his father and the godless of his mother, the greatness of both of them. And therefore he was kind to them and good to them. He listened to them. He was an attentive son to them because he respected them and he wanted them to feel that sense of respect from him. It's not about giving things. It's about doing things. Kavod is not about buying stuff, but kavod is really ultimately about the honor that you give to another person. Yaakov understood that he needed to send a message to Rachel. And the message that he needed to send to Rachel is, Rachel, you are worth $1 million. You are an incredible human being. You've got incredible potential, and I see the greatness in you, which is why I love you, which is why I want to marry you. That's why Yaakov Avinu was so devastated when he realized that he had no money. It wasn't because he was a fetchy little man that he wanted to win the heart of his beloved by giving her a nice ring, giving her a big rock. That wasn't it. He wanted to show her how much she meant to him, how much she meant in life, how valuable she was. And without the money, he wasn't able to be mechabed her. The gift itself would have been the kavod. Why did Yaakov feel that he needed to give her so much kavod? That he needed to convince her how amazing she was? Later in the Parsha, Yaakov decides that it's time to leave Lavan bad situation, not going well, toxic environment. It's time to go. He turns to his two wives. Now, no wife, if she's living with her parents, really, really wants to move away from her parents. So Yakov, he's got double the trouble, because he doesn't have to convince one woman to leave her parents. He's got to convince both of them. And he turns to Rachel and Leah and he starts to tell them a story. And he paints them a situation that is dismal and bleak. He tells them of all the tsaras and the troubles and the woes that he has, of how disgusting their father was to him. And he tells a whole song and dance to them. And then they look at him and they say to him, Vatan Rachel V'Leah. And at the end of the spiel, he says to them, I think it's time for us to go. He didn't say to them, listen, we need to talk. I think I need to leave, and then tell them a whole story. He tells them a whole story, and at the end of the story, he says, oh, and by the way, I think it's time to go. So they look at him and they say, Vatan Rachel V'Leah, Vatomarno lo, Ha'od lanu chelik v'nachal bebeis avinu. Do we have anything left here? Hello, nachri eisnech shavnu loy. He looks at us as foreigners, as strangers. Ki mochanu, because he sold this out. He didn't give money for you to marry us. He took money. Vayochel gam ochel es kaspenu. He stole our money also. He took away things from us. What were Rachel and Leah saying to him? What took you so long, Yakov? What have we been doing here all these years? We've been waiting for this day. We've been waiting for the moment that we could bust out of here. Because what he did to us, he shoved us down. He abused us. He treated us like ATM machines, like cash cows. He treated us as if we were going to make him money. He gave us no honor. He gave us no love. He gave us no nurturing. Of course we want out of here. We want to be here for one more minute. Yaakov Avinu knew that already 20 some odd years ago. Yaakov Avinu saw it in Rachel's eyes. When he kissed Rachel, he recognized that Rachel was pushed down. Rachel was made to feel like she was valueless. And therefore, Yaakov Avinu only wanted to show her how valuable she was. And that's why he offered 7 years. An outrageous amount. Nobody asked you to offer anything, let alone to offer $1 billion, to offer 7 years of work. But Yaakov Avinu wanted to make a point. And the point was, Rachel, you are worth everything. She got nothing. And all he wanted to give her was a little bit of kavod, was a little bit of honor. Yaakov Avinu teaches us that the whole basis of a marriage, it's kavod. It's a sense of honor that you can give another person. That's the reason why it went like yomim achadim, like one day. Because when you look at a goal and you say, in 30 days, my grandson is going to get married. So that means that there's nothing really between here and 30 days from now. Those 30 days are going to take 30 years to get there. But when you're preparing every day, today I'm going to do this to get ready, today I'm going to do that to get ready, tomorrow it's going to be the next thing, tomorrow the next thing. And when every day is valuable and worthwhile, so then it goes, ki yomim achadim. It goes like one day. Because I'm not just waiting for the goal, I'm working towards it. And when I'm doing something important, time flies. Time flies when you're having fun, when you're feeling fulfilled, when it's something meaningful. Yaakov Avinu knew that every single day of working for Rachel, he was sending a message. You're valuable. You're a somebody. You are an epis. There's something to you. And that's why I'm schwitzing for you, Rachel, because you're somebody. And therefore, every day for Yaakov was filled with purpose, was filled with tachlis, was filled with meaning. And that's why it went kiyamim achadim. Went like one day. What an unbelievable lesson in life. The first lesson, that it's about giving kavod to others, making people feel respected. Marriage is about kavod. It's about making people feel respected. And when you're living your life to be able to show that respect, you're living your life with a tachlis, with a purpose. When you wake up in the morning, there is a purpose for your day. So then time moves. It's kiyamim achadim. It's meaningful because it's filled with a purpose and it's filled with a direction. When we sit around and we feel like it's just schlepping, it's because we don't look at every day as being that incredible golden opportunity. Similar to the message that we spoke about yesterday in the Mishnah, that when you recognize that every single day is valuable and you have no idea what's going to be next, but right now the task at hand is to put value into this day, then that gives your life meaning and flow, and it gives it an evenness, and it gives it a sense of tachlis, that it's kiyamim achadim. It's like a moving piece of time. It's not schlepping. It's not standing still. It's not something to dread, but it's something that is filled with a sense of purpose, with a sense of a goal to accomplish something. That's why Yaakov Avinu was devastated. Yaakov Avinu was devastated not because he was some kvetchy guy. Yaakov Avinu was devastated because all he wanted to do was to give Rachel a little kavod. And without the money, he wasn't able to do it. My thoughts about explaining, I think, somewhat of a difficult parsha and giving it a little bit of a positive twist and understanding exactly what was going on with Yaakov and his wives. Okay, I'll give a refund for the 6 minutes, and everybody should have an amazing, beautiful one. You know what? I'll actually give you another quick idea. Beginning of the parsha. It's always good to start with the very beginning. Vayeitzei Yakov, the most famous Rashi in Chumash, I think. Oh, second most famous Rashi in Chumash. The first one is on the first pasuk in Parshas, because that I think probably most people have learned. But this one is also pretty famous. The pasuk says, "Vayeitzei Yakov Beersheva." Yaakov left Beersheva, Vayelech Harana, and he went to Haran. Now, as far as I know, there's only one way to get to Haran: by leaving the place you were in previously. You can't get to the next place unless you leave the one you're in. If that's the case, why did the Torah have to say Vayeitzei Yakov, that Yaakov left Beersheva and he went to Haran? Duh, just tell me he went to Haran, and I know that he left Beersheva. So why was it necessary for the Torah to go out of its way? Torah is economic in its words. Why would the Torah have said Vayeitzei Yaakov and then Vayelech Haran, and he went to Haran? So Rashi, the famous Rashi says, because Yitzias Tzadik Min HaMakom, that when a righteous person leaves a place, Oisa Roshem, it makes a mark. It leaves a hole. It leaves a void. Because when the tzaddik is in the city, the tzaddik is the light, the shine. He's the beauty of the city. He fills it with tzidkus, with righteousness. And when he leaves, that righteousness, that light, that shine, that beauty leaves along with him. And it's only when he's gone that we recognize what he gave us. Beautiful, beautiful idea, used in many, many different contexts. Only one small problem with that. This is not the first time the Torah says Vayeitzei. This is not the first person in Torah that left. Avram Avinu left. Yitzchak left. Why is it only by Yaakov that we teach this story? Why is it only by Yaakov that Rashi makes this point? By the way, Yitzias Tzadik Min HaMakom, when a righteous person leaves a place, it makes a mark. You could have said that, you could have taught it to me by Avram. First place in the Torah that it happened, you could have said it by Avram. It would have made more sense to say it by Avram. It was the first time. Say it by Yitzchak. Why say it by Yaakov? Avram Avinu was a Baal Chesed. Well-known Baal Chesed, a kind person. When he was in the town, everybody knew he was there because it was free lunch. You didn't have to pay for it. You went, you could eat 3 meals a day there. Anything you wanted, you walked into his tent. You got it. He took care of you. He was the kindest, goodest guy in the world. You didn't have to wait until he left the place to say, oh my gosh, I miss him. I didn't realize that he was such a good guy. You knew he was a good guy because you were living and sponging off of him. Yitzchak was phenomenally wealthy. When a wealthy guy lives in town, you know he's there. He's dedicating buildings. He's throwing his money around. He's building institutions. You know the rich guy's there. You don't have to wait until he leaves to know that he's there. But Yaakov Avinu represented Torah. And very often Torah doesn't get to our radar. Very often godless and greatness in Torah doesn't make that impression on us. That when we see Kedusha, it doesn't make an impression. Only when it's taken out of our midst. Only then does it mean something to us. And that's why Rashi waited until this moment to teach us that message. He waited until the Baal HaTorah, until the Ish Tam Yoshev Olim, until the one who was saturated with Torah left to teach us that we often don't recognize the greatness that lives in our midst until Le'aleinu it's taken away from us. Better we should recognize the greatness and the blessing that we have while it's there than have to wait until it's gone. Okay, my thoughts. Everybody should have a beautiful, amazing, wonderful day and a beautiful, illuminated, wonderful Shabbos. This is a very special Shabbos for us. Yirtzeh Hashem will be the bris of our grandson, of our newest grandson, here in Modi'in, Yirtzeh Hashem. And we should all be zocha legadlo leTorah l'chuba l'masim tovim l'achniso b'riso shel Abraham Aminu b'ito yu'u b'zmanoi.